Hi, I'm Heather Smith. Welcome to Cloud Stories, a podcast exploring the accounting and business apps community. Stay up to date with the curated content I'm sharing by signing up to the Accounting Apps newsletter, available at heathersmithau.com. Today, I share with you my interview with Michael Wood. Michael truly lives and breathes the title entrepreneur. Currently, he's founder and CEO of Translucent. His LinkedIn profile reveals he's also the founder of 4 other companies. The company that you're most likely to know him from is Receipt Bank. Michael was the original co-founder and was there till April 2021 when it was acquired by private equity group HG Capital. Please be aware I strategically partner with Translucent. I was an early adopter of Receipt Bank and I'm also an early adopter of Translucent. I'm sure you will find this interview enlightening and entertaining. Enjoy. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the Cloud Stories podcast. Really excited to have you here. So in preparing for this interview, I've been trawling through photos of the Aberdeen Zoology Museum. And there's a photo of a very manky taxidermied koala in that museum. That's not what koalas look like. Within 4 years of graduating from a Bachelor of Science in zoology, you'd co-founded Coco Jambo, which almost bankrupts you. You then, 7 years after graduating, founded Tweed London, helping companies with marketing and growth. So why did you choose to do a Bachelor in Science of Science in zoology? And the fun question for you, being a zoology major, what's your favourite uniquely Scottish animal?
Oh, God, there's lots in there, Heather. So I don't remember the koala. The thing we always laughed at in that museum was the hedgehog. So the hedgehog had been taxidermied. Like a hedgehog is this violent creature. So it was always hilarious, this sort of hedgehog, although it's something you have to jump out the way of. So I was absolutely convinced in my teenage years I was going to be a zoologist. So always really enjoyed science, was always my strength. Hugely interested in whales and dolphins, particularly orcas. So, you know, that was just sort of super interested, was going to do it. There was probably a bit of naivety there. My parents went to university in a generation where it didn't matter what degree you did. Just by getting a degree, you know, you were locked and loaded onto a good career path. So they were very relaxed about me doing a degree like that. And it was a real shock for me when finishing the degree and having made the decision, actually, I don't want to do zoology, to find out, you know, employers were, you know, what the hell's this? You know, it was like, you know, because I'd very much been brought up to believe, oh, it doesn't matter what degree you do, you know, just the fact that you've got a degree under your belt will sort of see you good. So it was tremendously difficult to get that first job, like really, really tough. But yeah, I halfway through the degree, it was like an itch that got scratched, an intellectual itch. About sort of 3 years into the 4-year degree, I was like, oh, you know what? I've learned tons about zoology, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And my dad was a management consultant. And so I'd sort of grown up with copies of things like the Harvard Business Review lying around and stuff like that. So there had always been that as another interest. So I sort of switched from one interest to another.
Wow. And listening to that, I remember I interviewed Sophie, who was your third employee, and she was a grad in English literature. And we always went, how did you employ an English literature grad to do the phenomenal job that Sophie did? But maybe it was your openness to having a zoology degree that made you go, yeah, I can Sophie can do this.
Oh, that probably is true. I must admit, I'm completely blind pretty much to what degree someone has done. I'm interested in the institution. I'm interested in sort of how they did. But yeah, very blind to what they did.
Yeah. So we'll take it that your favorite uniquely Scottish animal is.
Oh yes, I haven't answered. Uniquely Scottish.
Well, they actually list dolphins, and you said dolphins because the Moray Firth near Aberdeen is known for a population of bottlenose dolphins.
It is, and I went up to study them for a week or so. Yeah, so
But is that your favorite? You can name another if you wish to.
Well, that trip is more. I sort of met one of my first girlfriends on that trip, so I don't remember the dolphins quite as much. So you definitely can't call bottlenose dolphins uniquely Scottish. I'm trying to think what is uniquely Scottish.
Because this was my thing. I thought zoology in Scotland. What is there in Scotland? But
everyone's sort of going off around the world and things like that. Uniquely Scotland. Scotland's got some fairly cool mammals. Like the population of the deer are amazing, and you have got things like pine martens and sort of ptarmigan and all those kind of things. But you know what? I might actually I'm going to go left field again. Not uniquely Scottish, but I did fish a lot. Salmon.
Oh, yeah.
Something pretty amazing about wild salmon. So I'm going to go salmon.
It said Atlantic salmon in the rivers of Aberdeenshire is famous in the River Dee and the River Don.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We now have pictures of you doing a Brad Pitt and doing that fly fishing in those rivers.
Fly fishing is what I did, but I would be very, very nervous of comparing my look to Brad Pitt.
Well, we have everyone out there thinking that way. So, Michael, then we come to 2010, 13 years ago. Bruno Mars was singing Just the Way You Are. And then you, along with Alexi Pren, co-founded Receipt Bank. So can you share with us the story to founding Receipt Bank?
Sure. So it came about in a way I think many of your listeners will be familiar of. And that was in a previous business, Tweed. I decided in 2006, 2007 to do my own books because I wanted to save some money. And in the UK at the time, MYOB was the one marketing itself as the sort of easiest to use, most business owner friendly package. Obviously, it's for DVD, so I ordered the DVD, got the DVD, sort of did a year of my books. And at the end of the year, went to my accountant, and she was very nice about it. And she says, well, Michael, normally the year-end fee would be £2,000, but you've made such a mess of your books. It's going to be, I can't remember if it was £3,000 or £4,000. It was basically doubled. It's like you've made such a mess. To undo all this, we're going to have to charge you double. So that was a bit dispiriting. But she said, look, here's something that you won't be able to muck up. And she introduced me to an online piece of software called Cashflow, spelled with a K, so Kash. And unbeknownst to me, that was the first cloud accounting package in the UK. This is 2007. So it was also one of the first cloud accounting packages around the world. And so the complete serendipity of Receipt Bank was I was one of the first cloud accounting users anywhere in the world. And so I used it in 2000. I used it for 3 years and got to 2010, the point which you mentioned. And by then, I had got a bit fed up with cloud accounting. So I in some ways, I loved the benefits. And there were a huge number of benefits. But the bit I got fed up with is, of course, when you're back in the day of talking about a file, whether it be a Sage file, an MYOB file, a QuickBooks file, whoever had the file was responsible for the bookkeeping and hence had to do all the data entry of the receipts, the invoices, etc. And what had happened between myself, my accountant, and the fact this was in the cloud is it had become ambiguous who was doing the bookkeeping. And because I was someone that was always late, it ended up being me. And so I ended up losing both a ton of time at the year end, suddenly having to do all this data entry into my cloud accounting package. But I was also losing a ton of money because I didn't have a regular process. It was at that year end with no time before deadline. I was having to, I'm sure, I definitely got a flight. Where's the receipt for that? Or I know I got more taxis than this. So I in 2010, I absolutely felt, cloud accounting is the future, but also there has to be a solution for this data entry, paperwork to cloud workflow because it doesn't work. And that's when I started looking around for something in 2010. And I came across a business called Receipt Farm. And Receipt Farm said, we will give you an envelope. We'll post you an envelope once a month. You put your receipts and invoices in it and post it back. We will do the data entry and it'll be available for you in a cloud. I think they might have called it a cloud vault or something like that at the time. And I was like, this is great. This is exactly what I need. So signed up for the free trial. They sent me an envelope. I popped my receipts in the envelope. I sent them back. Sure enough, I got an email 4 days later saying, please log in, logged in. There they all were, scanned, data extracted. And it was like, this is brilliant. But I wrote back to them saying, the issue is once I've put my envelope in the post, I think I'm done. I think that's now my accountant's responsibility or my bookkeeper's responsibility. So 2 questions were, are you going to create the ability for my accountant to be able to log in to my Receipt Farm account? And are you going to integrate with the cloud accounting packages so the data flows from Receipt Farm to the accounting package? And they wrote back saying, Mr. Woods, we're closing down today. And so I wrote back saying, well, can I buy it? And that's how Receipt Bank started.
I didn't know any of that. That's fascinating. Interesting tidbit in there, which you perhaps know, was Wayne Schmidt brought MYOB to the UK.
Oh, did he? Oh, yeah, I know Wayne. I didn't know he was the man that brought it. Okay,
he did. Yeah, he did bring MYOB to the UK, and well, that was fascinating. Oh, you had the same because I remember the early days of Rod Drury talking about Xero because I was sitting with the MYOB file and I was sitting doing the data entry. And I just absorbed the frustration, whereas watching Rod Drury for the first time talk, he had all that frustration. And I was like, chill, man. But I get it's the same thing with you. I hear the frustration and you come up with a solution for it rather than me who just absorbs it and deals with it.
Well, there's a great Bill Gates quote about something like, always employ lazy people because lazy people will always find the shortcut to the problem and dealing with the frustration. Yeah.
And it's funny because every so often you deal with someone from, which is now Dext, and they have the email address farm in it. They don't have the Receipt Bank address, like only very few people, but I've just seen it every so often I see it. So that's funny. So where you were Receipt Farm, and then how did you evolve to Receipt Bank, the name Receipt Bank? Where did that come from?
So straight away, we changed it to Receipt Bank. That was one of the first things we did. And the thinking around that was, in my business, Tweed, I had been basically a marketing director for a number of businesses. And one of them was accounting business in the UK. So I had helped to build an accounting business in the UK. So I was very aware of the different workflows and the different problems that accounting firms were facing. And so I felt absolutely this business, this product, much more interesting for an accounting practice than an SME, to actually give them a workflow they can deploy to all their clients. And obviously, this is 2010. There's a huge amount of nervousness then about security in the cloud, etc. And the Receipt Farm was this sort of irreverent brand, like that. Literally, the envelopes were covered with silhouettes of farm animals and stuff like that. And our thinking was, well, that's not, that this isn't the time for an irreverent brand. Actually, and the word bank, we felt, was such an easy, simple way to convey security. So we literally, we didn't do a big rebranding exercise. We got rid of the animals, we kept the font, we kept the colors, we kept everything, but just switched the word farm to bank, to try and reassure our initial users and clients that no, we're taking security seriously.
Absolutely. I hope you've got one of those old envelopes framed.
It's a good question. I don't have an envelope, but my sister, when I left, gave me a very lovely gift. Is, you can imagine, sort of over the years, there's different sort of receipt bank and T-shirts from different events. And she'd sort of kept a series of some of the different colors and stuff like that. So many people will know Dex today as the orange. And I picked the orange, I don't know, about 2012, 2013, 2014. It was a bit later. So we've sort of got the colors before the orange and things like that. It's sort of the evolution in that. So that's one of the things I need to get framed, just putting those T-shirts up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's trying to think of ways, nice ways to frame them and showcase them. So how did you meet Alexi?
Alexis and I had worked together at a previous business. And as I say, my role had been basically a fractional marketing director. And Alexis had been working in that business as the sales director. So we'd already sort of worked together probably for a couple of years, and we'd sort of felt, we actually made quite a powerful team here. And so we'd already sort of had an agreement, if an opportunity, let's look around for an opportunity to work together. And hence when Receipt Farm said they're closing down and I wrote back saying, well, I'd like to buy it, my next call was to Alexis saying, I think I found our opportunity. Let's do this.
Fantastic. So I have a photo of our first meeting together, which is Sydney XeroCon, August 2014. And I think in those early days, Receipt Bank won add-on of the year 4 times between 2012 and 2015. And so that was the Xero add-on of the year. How important was your Xero partnership?
Huge. Absolutely huge. Absolutely key. Xero made an incredible investment in their API team right from the beginning. So when we integrated with Xero in 2010, 2011, what you could do with connecting the two software, and I think most people out there will at least recognize the phrase API. But if you think sort of the way you plug two bits of softwares together, and the key thing is not all APIs are equal, not at all. And so what we could do with Xero was phenomenal because of the work they'd done with the API. And that meant we could create this really powerful combination of, everything from, let's say we're sending an invoice in, being able to, does it go to, is it approved? Is it not approved? Being able to look up the existing contacts. So when we're trying to put a name to something, or we're trying to sort of put a name on an invoice or receipt, there's a lot of people do their bookkeeping differently. So, how do they previously record Bunnings in their Xero? Is it just the word Bunnings? Is it Bunnings capitalized, non-capitalized? Is it Bunnings Sydney? Or, the fact we're able to look that kind of stuff up and then match to that makes the bookkeeping a lot cleaner and a lot neater, a lot more correct. I'm using slightly sort of facile examples and I can't think offhand of deeper examples, but Xero had done incredible work on their API. So we struggled with other integrations around the world where, yes, you could send a receipt in, or yes, you could send an invoice in, but you couldn't create this really powerful experience. And of course, the other thing Xero had done was they had created things like XeroCon, they had created things like roadshows. So it was an opportunity to be able to get in front of the Xero audience and show what we could do. So Rod and the team, back then, sort of Chris Ridd in Australia, Gary in the UK, they'd created this amazing platform for add-ons as we were to sort of come in and say, no, we really can expand the Xero platform here and create an even more powerful combined product. So yeah, Xero is just absolutely huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And back in those days, as you said, the API that they developed was so much more advanced than anyone around, and it shifted some Goliaths out there in the market. And I think sort of times have changed since then. But back in the day, it was. I remember just giving webinar after webinar explaining APIs to people because, it was just unheard of. And people just were like, magic. What is this magic? So with hindsight of your time at Receipt Bank, is there any things that you would have liked to have done differently?
There's lots. I wish we'd done more international expansion. We did a good job in Australia. We did a good job in Canada. We did a good job in South Africa. Did a good job in France. But actually, there was an opportunity to do more in sort of Germany, Netherlands, other countries like that. So there's definitely missed opportunities there.
Other European countries.
There was definitely, we were a little too constrained by our own self-image around, we were working on accounts payable and expenses workflows. I wish we'd been a bit more expansive in. So let me start in another place for that. So if we look at what Xero was able to do for the industry, and let's just reduce Xero's impact to one area, it was an incredible productivity tool for the industry. The bank feed was amazing, the single ledger was amazing, and the API was amazing. And so Xero was this huge productivity tool for the industry. And, we see that in the fact that enabled many firms to move away from time-based billing to gives them the confidence of fixed fee, the increased productivity. And then Receipt Bank came in, or Dex as now came in with what we did for accounts payable and expenses, and we were a significant productivity benefit. I do regret that I don't think we did enough acknowledge, if we sort of think of the world in that way, of actually the value we were able to assist the industry with was productivity, and just literally looked at that. It's like, okay, fundamentally we're a productivity tool, not an accounts payable tool. And we'd had more expansive conversations with our clients, our users, about what other workflow do you need help with? How do we, let's say we'd set ourselves a goal of, 5% productivity gain for our users every year, something like that. I think that kind of gain was feasible and probably still is feasible. But we didn't quite look at the world in that way. Yeah. So I'm proud of some of what we did, but there definitely were missed opportunities too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Look, I always say that an accounting, someone we've got online, the next step is a receipt scanning solution, and that is going to make such a big difference for them. And I don't even want them kind of thinking about anything else until they actually have that in place and they're comfortable with that. And it's then they can start of kind of look at other things to adopt. So I remember years ago, you were everywhere. And then you gave a webinar. I'm not sure if you remember this, and it was on chess and AI. And it was one of the first people, I guess, I saw in the industry. AI has been around for decades, but you were one of the first people in the industry talking about AI. And you said something like, a person could not always win at chess. An AI cannot always win at chess. But a person working with AI could always win at chess, win a game of chess. Do you remember that?
I do. Centaurs. They're known as centaurs when a human plays with the computer. Yeah, a centaur.
Yeah. So you obviously were having sort of deep thoughts about that, because I remember we just used to watch all these how things work, training, push buttons, and then all of a sudden we had this chess webinar. We're like, what's happening?
Yeah, I can be a bit weird.
But the funny thing is that what you talked about then, and that was years ago, that must have been 7 years ago, maybe.
Yeah,
in the last
would be 2015, 16, something like that. Yeah.
But in 2023, every webinar I've sat in has basically said that. And there was that like massive gap of no one talking about it. So as you obviously having these big thoughts about things and pushing it, pushing the industry forward, even if it was only Gillian Rosso and me listening, going, "What's going on?"
I do try to. Sorry, what excites me is about looking forward and looking about where the industry is going and what is possible. That is absolutely the bit that interests me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our listeners, in 2021, overnight, Receipt Bank rebranded as Dex, as people will know, possibly one of the biggest controversies in the industry. But then a few weeks later, there was I'm paraphrasing, a multi-million-pound share buyout from the private equity group HG Capital. And so I guess that sort of you were there, and then you sort of moved on, maybe had a rest. And then after sort of years of not being heavily involved in the accounting ecosystem, you've come back as the founder and CEO of Translucent, solving multi-entity problems for businesses around the world. Sound about right?
Yeah. It does. That's a very good summary. Yeah. So
can you share how your time at Receipt Bank led you to launching Translucent?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned earlier sort of Receipt Bank sort of expanded quite a few countries around the world, and our accounting setup at Translucent was I think we had a QBO for France and we had Xeros for our other entities around the world. So I really must check on the exact number, but we were something like 6 or 8 entities. So we're running these multiple Xero files, and it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And it's no disrespect to Xero. Xero is not designed to be a multi-entity accounting system, but it's a sign of Xero's success that actually a lot of businesses grow up on it. It's super powerful. They really like what it does. And so when they add a second entity, a third entity, a fourth entity, they add, other Xero files. And they are then left with a series of workflows that don't work because, of course, 2 Xeros can't talk to each other, 2 Xeros can't consolidate. And of course, there's other issues as Xero goes up. Its data model isn't designed for this. Its permission model isn't designed for this. There's a whole lot of different issues that happen. And we saw this firsthand at Receipt Bank. So we had a good couple of years where our CFO was like, I think we need to move to NetSuite. And the appetite in the business was, well, that's a huge migration. That's a big project. There really isn't much upside. So we spent a couple of years hacking around, how can we do things to avoid this migration? And at the same time, I was out there speaking to a lot of other entrepreneurs, and they were saying the same thing. So I was aware there was quite a community of people of, I'm running multi-entity Xero, and fundamentally, I'm happy with Xero for for all my sort of single entity processes, whether it be payroll, whether it be year end, but the multi-entity bit's a problem. And so I'd recognized then there's a really interesting business then. And I frankly tried to give the idea away quite a few times. So a few entrepreneurs came up to me in the interviewing years. It's like, oh, Michael, any good ideas? And I was like, oh, if you want a huge business, build multi-entity Xero. But as for these things, you can't really sort of give them away. People have got to sort of feel it themselves. And then what happened in early 2022 was I'd made a number of angel investments, and one of the companies I'd made an angel investment into, they phoned me up and was like, Michael, a whole lot of our clients have this problem. And the problem he went on to describe was multi-entity. And there was something about hearing someone else describe it back to me, someone else use their own language, completely unprompted, made me think, oh, you know what? I am going to go and do this. And it does come back to, I've got some pretty strong views about what the industry is going to look like in 2030 and what technology for accounting and bookkeeping is going to look like in 2030. And I think multi-entity is one of the places that is right now very behind. And so what we've launched Translucent to do is to be the one-stop shop solution for multi-entity. So we don't think you can solve multi-entity by tying together a significant number of apps. We don't think that makes sense. So instead, we're saying, look, we will build app after app after app within Translucent, within one application, within one UI, and each app represents a workflow. So we've already built multi-entity search, where you can search all your all your transactions, all your journal lines in one place. You obviously an incredible boon for the sort of AP clerks managing 10 plus entities. We've already built group reporting. And this month we're launching both our intercompany app and our live sheets app to work on the data in Google Sheets and Excel. And we'll launch, you'll see from Translucent is we'll launch about an app every quarter. So we'll launch about 4 apps a year, because we do believe we're in a different software era than we have been in the past decade, which I'm happy to talk about. But that's what we're doing.
So with what you're saying there, and I'll come back later on to the actual apps that you've released. You've mentioned to me the concept of a compound startup and how you're using this to build Translucent. Could you explain that to our listeners who perhaps haven't heard of that terminology, compound startup?
Sure. So the way sort of people in Silicon Valley think about technology, they often talk about bundling and unbundling. And from 2010, let's use round numbers, from 2010 to 2020, we were in an unbundling era. So what that basically meant was these huge, powerful new technologies came along, and they were mobile and they were cloud, and alongside cloud is broadband. And what that meant was a whole lot of workflows suddenly could be done differently. And we can go back to receipt bank, but we could go anywhere. And we don't need to stick to accounting. We can go obviously all across industry, all around the world. These technologies meant you could do things in a different way. Now, whether that was hailing a taxi with an Uber, whether that was getting a receipt into your accounting package with Receipt Bank, these technologies are fundamentally different. And because they were such a huge change, the change was so vast and so all-encompassing and impacting everything, it meant that thousands and thousands of new companies were born. Because, of course, what each of these entrepreneurs or each of these founders was looking at, they were looking at a workflow they were familiar with and saying, oh, well, mobile changes that in this way, or cloud changes that in this way. And there was the potential for so much change. It meant that companies typically were only focused, like Receipt Bank, on, if not just one workflow, a very narrow range of workflows. So you had this unbundling phase where a huge explosion of new companies were formed. And I think every accountant and listener to your podcast will be familiar with this, whether from walking the floor at XeroCon or whether the phone ringing for them or whatever it might be. So from 2010, 2020, we went through this unbundling phase where there was an explosion of new companies. Now, where we're at in 2020, 2030 is, if we think of that change, I like to think of it like sort of an earthquake. You know, the earthquake happened in 2010 and everyone responded. But what's happened from sort of 2015 onwards, and definitely from 2020 onwards, is the pace of change has been much, much, much slower. And I think, again, everyone listening would recognize that. And it's not that technology companies and software companies haven't been adding new features, but just the pace of change has been much slower. I think everyone would recognize, there's much less whoa or wow moments. There's much less sort of surprise. It's much more sort of incremental adding of features. And that's a sign that sort of the earthquake of the new technology is finished. And it's a sign that we're now in a bundling phase. And what that means is it actually makes much more sense for software to do a wide range of workflows, because instead of having a vendor for every workflow and having obviously to set up definitions or set up permissions or set up billing or set up users or all these different things in each different package, it's much easier to do it in one place. So what you're seeing around the technology world right now is these breakout companies or companies that are saying to users is, look, we know the workflows you've got, but what we'll now do is, instead of just doing one thing, we'll do them all in one place. So you don't have to learn a new app. You don't have to, define your metrics again and again. You don't have to set permissions again and again, whatever it may be. And the most prominent and forward company in the space is a company called Rippling. It started with payroll data and people data in the US. And there's some great podcasts and writings around Rippling and the compound startup. But we're bringing that concept to accountancy and finance, SMB finance data. So we think there's something really exciting for users to be able to say, look, you don't need all these apps, so we can cut your cost of software. We can cut your cognitive load of software without in any way cutting the quality of software. So that's why I talk about we're doing an app a quarter.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And with that sort of nice foundation and understanding there, let's move to talk about some of the apps that you've released through Translucent. So the first one is App Search. And look, I'll use my explain it to me like a 5-year-old explanation for my audience, in that you plug in your Xero files or your QuickBook files or your other files, and it literally seems to, for me, break down the data into Lego blocks, and they're all kind of sitting there. It doesn't happen instantly. It takes a bit of while to go through and do that. But you then jump into Translucent and you can just search for anything. And for me, it's phenomenally fast to come back, do the search, find things, and then you click on them and you drill through to get to whatever file it is, the Xero file or the QuickBooks file. So that search functionality, I never in a million years dreamed you would be able to have. It is so much superior to the search functionality found within Xero, and you're offering it for free. It's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Correctly?
No, it is. So one way to think of Translucent is a bit like a data warehouse. So we're trying to give our users a single source of truth. So we're trying to give them, we do break down the walls. Like they might be using 5 Xeros or 50 Xeros. It doesn't matter. We're breaking all the walls between them down. So they've got one set of data, one warehouse of data. And so search was a very easy first app for us to do, of say, okay, you now got everything in one place. So whether you want to look at, I'm going to use trite examples again, but if you want to look at all your Starbucks costs, in across all your entities in one place, you can. If you want to look at, your total revenue across all your entities for 1 week or, 1 month in one place, you can. And if, you want to find out which entity that invoice that needs to be paid today, where that invoice has gone, it will show you and allow you to click back through to Xero. And you're right, when you first set up Translucent with your Xero files, it takes either some minutes or some hours to sync the data the first time, but thereafter it's live and instant.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes people are so used to magic these days, they think it happens instantly. So I always like to put that reality in there. But yeah, look, it's a phenomenal tool and it is free. I would encourage anyone who's out there who's dealing with any sort of multi-entity scenario to try it out. So moving on from that one, you have the group reporting, which consolidates your reports. And it says it's designed for up to, so I'm reading from your website, up to 200 entities that sort of Translucent is sort of pitching itself at.
So one of the things we've noticed with group reporting is, obviously there's quite a lot of tools that have done consolidation and group reporting for quite a few years in the ecosystem. We felt quite a lot of them were more tailored to sort of smaller number of entities, 2, 3, 4 entities. So we've deliberately looked to how solutions, frankly, like NetSuite have solved this. So we've got that greater ability to deal with larger numbers. Frankly, we can actually deal with more than 200, but 200 just, there's very, very few people running more than 200
yes.
Xero files.
Yeah.
But again, the way we're doing this behind the scenes allows for some superpowers. So for example, because we've already synced all the data in Translucent, we can do things like drill downs. So when you're looking at a consolidated report in Translucent, let's say that's last month's P&L, you can click on any total and then see the drill down transactions that make that up. And in the next few weeks, not only will you be able to see the transactions, you'll then be able to click through to the actual Xero file, the actual transaction in the appropriate Xero file. So you'll be able to go all the way from, let's say, you're looking at last month's sales, or, you're looking at last month's COGS, click on a thing, look at the list of transactions, want to click on a particular transaction, go all the way back to Xero. So, we're really proud of some of the sort of technology platform we've built there and what we can do with it.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. And so, it's phenomenal. I don't think people even thought that this was actually going to be possible, that what you've built here. Then app 3 is live sheets, and accountants love their sheets. So this syncs you to Google Sheets and to Excel, and accountants love being able to get their data into Sheets. So I'm sure that will be a popular one as well. And then app 4, which is coming out maybe for Christmas, which is the
first users will be using it for Christmas. Yeah,
which is the intercompany one, which I would call it intercompany loans. I think you referred to it as a treasury function. Am I correct?
No, the treasury is the next. It's a bit closer to the next one's coming, bank consolidation. So intercompany is just the ability, whether you're doing recharges or whatever, it's the first time we're writing back to Xero. It's the ability in one place to set up, intercompany transactions, recharges, etc. And again, we've got a pretty exciting roadmap for what's going to be possible there. So we're excited about that, app 4.
So are you able to share with us anything about what is coming? And if people want to give you suggestions about what they would like, what should they do?
Sure. So the next app we've made public is going to be bank consolidation. Mm-hmm. And bank consolidation isn't treasury, but it's sort of proto treasury. So what it's doing is it's looking up all your different bank accounts across all your entities and putting them in one place. So on one screen, you can see, obviously your total cash position, but also your cash position by currency, your cash position by entity. You can see your cash position alongside your AP and your AR, and it just gives you that ability to, to do basic sort of cash management on a multi-entity way, in a way that's just, again, not possible today. And we're not going into payments yet. We're not going into treasury yet or anything like that. And I say yet, I don't know if we ever will. But it's what we're trying to solve is just, as I say, each multi-entity workflow one by one. And this is, we know people right now are having to rummage around from system to system just to see their cash position. And so that's what we're aiming to solve in Q1.
Yeah. And if people are interested in feeding back what they see out there that they would like solved, how should they go about doing it? Is there a way for them to go about doing that?
So yeah, just absolutely, they can contact me, sort of Michael Wood, and that's michael@translucent.app, or any member of the team. We're always super interested to hear on what other problems people want solved. And I can't emphasize enough how many apps we're building. So right now we've got a long list of about 30 apps. We think we're going to do 4 a year. If anything, I'd say that's going to be at least 4 a year. That's not a sort of stretch goal of 4 a year. And I'd say we've got a list of 30. That list will grow, and we're very, very open to reprioritizing that list to
that's
needs.
6 years planning.
Yeah, exactly.
6 years.
And some apps are smaller. Some apps we can build in about 3-4 months. Some apps are bigger. It'll take us a couple of years. And we've talked about Xero a lot, but also what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect up the world. So as well as having the team building out the apps, I've got a team connecting other systems. So just this week, we've finished our Penny Lane integration. So Penny Lane is the leading cloud solution in France. QuickBooks Online recently exited France. So Penny Lane is sort of the default cloud app in France.
And it's Penny Lane. It's not a French name.
No, it is Penny Lane. I must Arthur, the CEO. I haven't actually asked him why it's called Penny Lane, but yeah, we just finished that integration, and we're going to be doing integrations literally around the world. So I know there's a lot of, I wouldn't have guessed this, but there's actually a lot of demand Australia to Germany. The main system in Germany is Datev, and we've had a lot of requests for Xero to Datev. Is an interesting one. And so you get these interesting sort of trade corridors of, there's a lot of business there and there. And so as well as building this suite of apps, solving multi-entity there, we're building a suite of integrations so that, no matter where your business is operating or your clients are operating, we expect Translucent to be a platform that can bring the data together.
Yeah. And like when I was 14 studying accounting, and it does sound like that you perhaps have got this far and haven't studied accounting. So I'm not sure if I'm jealous of you or upset about this.
That is absolutely true.
So when I was 14 and started studying accounting, I was like, wow, serenity. I love the balance of it. And global. I can just work anywhere in the world. And
you've done some cool things with that, Heather, as well. You've properly used that. I
absolutely have, but I've just that whole vision, accounting is global. And then Xero was the first solution that had, for me, that was accessible, that had that global access. It actually had a global file in it. And it sounds like, you're again pushing the envelope with this global conversation. And I know I've just come back from the Singapore Asia Business and Finance Expo, and I had Alex Falcon-Harata from the UK and Paul Gardner from Hong Kong on the stage with us, all talking about Translucent and all talking about how it's solving their multi-entity problems, because they're living the accounting dream of traveling and working globally and dealing with global businesses.
We think we're really in the middle of a movement to a much more global world. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of sort of protectionism right now, and that's obviously true in certain trade flows. But I think, again, all your listeners would recognize, whether they're doing some outsourcing or whether they have clients in different countries, there is so much globalization going on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense to have a different tool set by country, which is what a finance team or an accountancy practice has to live with today. And that's very much a problem we've got our sights set on.
Yeah, very much so. And if we haven't stressed it enough, it does offer that multi-currency alignment as well, which I don't think we said multi-entity so many times. So it would be remiss of me not to mention that you've attracted some very well-known characters and credentials to invest in Translucent. So of the people I know, Go Cardless, one of the Jamies from HubDoc, Guy Pearson from Ignition, Stewie McLeod from Carbon, I believe Cashflow, Libio, a few others there, and 2 Xero founders, 2 of the 5 Xero founders. So that's so impressive. I'd love to be a fly on a wall or in the Swiss ski chalet when you all come together to discuss Translucent.
It's a good point. We have not yet. We've had just a year of building. We've not really started any sort of serious marketing or advertising yet. That all happens next year because we've had a year and a year, more than a year of just building. But those investments, I'm really pleased that they all came about just because when I thought I'm going to go and solve this problem, I phoned up people I know in the industry to say, what do you think? I think it's a big problem, but it's a bit of a funny problem because there's no numbers around it. There's no numbers anywhere saying, oh, there's this many multi-entity businesses in Australia, or there's this many multi-entity businesses on Xero. So it's a bit of a funny space. And so I was phoning them up to say, you know this industry really, really well. I think this is a big problem, but please tell me if I'm looking in the wrong place. And yeah, the conversations were just again and again. It's like, no, we think there's a really big problem there, and it'd be really interesting to solve. So that's how those conversations came about.
An exciting room of people, and it gives a lot of authority and kudos to you that they want to work with you, and to the solution that you're building. So you've mentioned that you have a lot of opinions on a lot of strong views on the accounting, the future of the accounting and technology industry through to 2030. So would you, as we're nearing the end of this podcast, like to share some of those views?
Sure. So the best thing I think to do is look at sort of what, how do you maximize the value of the data? So if we, that is the journey that the industry is on. So why did we all move to the cloud? We moved to the cloud because the data is more valuable in the cloud and it's cheaper to work on the data, or let's use the term service the data in the cloud. And again, that comes back to bank feeds, it comes back to APIs. But so it's cheaper to service, but it's also more valuable. And that value was both in the ability for people to access it, it was in the ability to manipulate it, and it was in the ability with sort of APIs taking the data out to, connect it to other things, whether it be FP&A solutions or, share it with other parts of the business, etc. So this SMB finance data is on a journey. It's on a journey independent of any of us, of moving to wherever the value is maximized. And so obviously the cloud made sense, and it's a cliche to talk about AI. Like, of course AI is going to play a huge role. Again, it's quite obvious to see, most of it's both obvious to see what AI is going to do, and yet it's very difficult to, as a firm owner or a CFO, to do anything today because there aren't suitable, robust solutions in place. So the AI is a bit funny, I think, as a CFO or running an accountancy practice, because it obviously is the next step, but yet there's no point in trying to take the step today. So what's going to happen is there's going to be more and more uses to this data, and we're seeing already the example I'd give to watch is if you look at what's happening in procurement in America. There's two companies, Vendor and Ramp, that now publish quarterly indexes, sort of saying, here's what people are buying, here's what people are paying, here are interesting vendors. It's a bit like, it's a bit like sort of the top 40 of old. It's like, is Madonna going up? Is Michael Jackson going down? I'm showing my age there. But it's a bit like that now for vendors, rather than waiting for marketing, so someone to come, it's like, well, actually, who's buying what are they paying? So we're going to move into this much, much more transparent world next of data. So everyone was very fixated in the move from desktop to cloud around security and privacy, and that completely made sense. There isn't going to be a sacrifice in security or privacy, but there is going to be more transparency. So there is going to be ways that people are going to share data. And these procurement benchmarks are a wonderful example of the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So I don't want to say too much more than that at this stage. I want to sort of build on what we're building, and then be able to show people some things will be pretty exciting. But yeah, I think the data is going to be increasingly valuable, which means for firms and finance departments that want to keep working with technology vendors, they're going to become even more important. But it does require surfing that technology wave, because the data is going to become more and more valuable, and that's what we're going to see.
Thank you so much, Michael, for spending an hour talking with me. This is an interview I've been wanting to do for many, many years, so very excited to finally connect and be able to do this with you. I want to encourage our listeners, if they're interested in Michael's product, to visit translucent.io. And my one final question for you, Michael, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we say thank you?
I think the only thing I would like to say is a thank you. Oh. Obviously I've been part of this community now since sort of 2011, 2010 received farmers bit, and Heather, obviously you personally have been a sort of huge part of the community. I'd like to say thank you to you and what you've done for the community, but also let's say thank you just to the community sort of more widely. Like, as you said, you said earlier in this podcast of, well, if anyone wants to reach out and shape the product, I know I'll get emails. There is this community where people sort of want to grab the steering wheel and sort of steer what's possible, and people are thoughtful with their time. And I hope at Receipt Bank we were, and I hope at Translucent we will be sort of suitably receptive and rewarding for that. So, I've always been welcomed in this community, and just want to say sort of thank you to those that are part of it.
Absolutely. It's been such a joy having you on the podcast. I'm sure I'll get you back again, because there's so many things happening in your world. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone else who you think would benefit from it. For in-depth discussions about the ecosystem, do join the Xero Mastermind group on Facebook. I recommend subscribing to the Accounting Apps newsletter for a comprehensive insight into the ecosystem space, accessible at heathersmithau.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Cloud Stories podcast. I'm Heather Smith, and this has been the Cloud Stories podcast.